In movies, books, television, and even in everyday life, you may hear the words, "You should probably listen to her." What? Her? Listen to the woman? Sometimes that can be the hardest words to swallow, especially if you're a man. Yet, is there something lost by doing what is said? In the Bible book of Genesis 21:12, God himself told Abraham to listen to his wife, even though he found it to be displeasing. At the same time, Abraham put aside his feelings and listened to God, and he was blessed with the seed that God promised in his line, later to be known as Jesus. Why bring up an old Bible scripture that women speaking out in an environment prone to follow man? While by looking into the past may show that maybe the idea that women did not have a voice needs to be examined. Looking locally into the history of Gilroy may show that even then women found ways to be heard. Therefore, I'd like to direct you to the attention of Gilroy back in 1850 to the 1900s. In this 50-year span, women of Gilroy found ways to expand upon traditional gender roles and contribute to society in a town that was controlled by the male gender norms. When we draw into the time of the 1850s of our local history, we see Gilroy had lots of land of agriculture. There were many ranches in Gilroy, yet the land did not know its true owner. Although that being the case, it was clear from the chores given to women what their roles were. By the courtesy of Gilroy Museum, found on the corner of 5th and Church Street, they provide a rich history of what life was like early on for women. Their day would start early in the morning at 4 to have breakfast ready by 6 a.m. All this being done without the conveniences we are used to today. For women had to gather wood, milk cows, gather eggs and other food, such as vegetables and fruits, if they were available, and keep meals going throughout the whole day. Her day also included doing the laundry and to washing the family clothes, often making her own soap to do these chores. After her daily chores and the meals provided, it did not mean that the woman's day was over. She most likely had to make all the clothes for her family, so a lot of sewing was done during the night under a lamp. For nice things to be around the home of a woman, she had to make them herself. She did not simply go out and buy them. These are not just facts provided by the Gilroy Museum. Just ask Electra Walkwell Osley. As I dive into the history of Electra Osley, her life was all those daily chores mentioned and more. Not only did Electra lose her husband, Samuel Osley, killed in a farm accident, but she could not have the land in her own name, the one that she lived on. When her family came to settle in Gilroy in 1854, they did not expect to be hit with the death of her husband in 1856. Electra had to run the ranch and her family from that time on, and life was not easy for her, for there were many tragedies that happened within her own family. And still, in the eyes of man, it was not right for her as a woman to own land. She was challenged by Henry Miller and lost in an 1875 lawsuit to the land that she took care of all of that time, over 1,000 acres. She was forced to buy back the land that she lived on, but she only purchased 664 acres, yet it was the prime land, and she did not disappear into the background. No, Electra emerged again in 1884 in a lawsuit and purchased 700 acres and had it recorded in her name, something completely unheard of. Electra inspired others, especially her daughters, for they too became supporters of liberation of the women's civil rights. Electra probably set a new fire that burned through the gender roles, that gave the courage to others to take action. When we take a look at Caroline Brooke Hosack, when she came into Gilroy in 1868, she did not come from the same background as Electra. No, she, on her second marriage, married her husband, Thomas Hosack, who had amassed a fortune playing the stock market. Though Carolina had a lot of money at her side, it did not go to waste, because she became known as the most generous benefactress. She brought out in Claudia Selwick's book, Images of America Glory, showed that Carolina was a impassionate speaker. And in fact, she gave a speech to have the Old Fellows Rebecca Children Home constructed in Gilroy. In 1897, this project was completed. Caroline remained a strong supporter of her beliefs, for she was the president of the Rebecca Assembly in 1890, and Carolina generously continued to give other gifts past the 1900s, things that will help preserve the history that we have today. These two principal women, Electra Osley and Carolina Hosack, did not stand alone. They had the support of women of their time. Each came from a different background and had different circumstances, yet both helped provide the town that we live in today. Though history has taught us that great men laid the tracks and foundations that we live in, evidence shows that women did not just stay in the kitchen to cook. No, she was attentive to her family and was often the glue that held it all together. History shows that if it was not for the push and voice of women in Gilroy in 1815 to the 1900s to go against the male's typical ideas of women, we would not be where we are today. Proverbs 31:10 reads, "A capable wife who can find? Her value is far more than that of corals." How true these words echo in the women in Gilroy, in a time where they were hidden from the scenes, only to be brought back to life by examining them again. Showing how vital that they were to us shows how Gilroy can thrive today. We see the famous handshake of Electra and Henry Miller that is embedded on a statue in downtown Gilroy. I hope that this documentary is only the beginning of the history found in the life of Gilroy. Continue to take an interest and add to the building blocks that have begun. Let the future of tomorrow know that women in history played major roles into the changes that we enjoy today. Thank you.
You fell in love with a vision of me. It was a version of me that I wasn't aware of, and maybe that's why we get